All right, so this webinar is all about tools and resources for astronomy. So we have three presenters or three presentations today. So presenter number one would be Dr. Kimberly Arkan of NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory. And then the next presenters will be Ferdinando De Micco and Luciano Garramone from Italian Amateur Astronomer Union. And the last but not the least presenter would be our lead for the IAU Inclusive Astronomy Outreach subgroup, Mr. Cesare Pagano. Let's continue with our presentation number one. Presenter number one is Dr. Kimberly Arkan, visualization scientist and emerging tech lead of the NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory. Dr. Kimberly Arkan is a leading expert in astronomy visualization and an innovator in 3D imaging, printing, and extended reality applications with astrophysics data. She has worked for NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory at the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory since 1998, and her current research includes sonification and spatial data, screen-based hologram, and other intersections of emerging technology and astrophysics. So I will give now the floor to Ms. Dr. Arkan. All right, so.
All right, can everyone see my screen okay? Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's so lovely to be here with you this morning for me, this afternoon, or this evening for you, whatever the time zone might be. I'd like to talk a little bit about my work that I've been doing for NASA's Chandra X-ray Observatory for the past almost 25 years. I've been working on the data from the telescope for quite some time, and I think for the past, I don't know, maybe the first 8 or 9 years of my career, I was really interested in just trying to figure out how to work with these X-ray photons, these X-ray packets of energy and information. And mostly that was through visuals, like what's on my screen now, which is the image of the supernova remnant, Cassiopeia A, which we're seeing mostly in X-ray light in this beautiful expanding degree of hot gas and material. But it did occur to me that I was missing an entire segment of the population by only presenting this information as a visual, as a two-dimensional image. And we started working with some colleagues at MIT, mostly Dr. Tracy Delaney, who was working to create the first 3D model of this data set, Cassiopeia A. And that 3D model really got me thinking that perhaps we could do something more with our data than just create a flat 2D image. And so I think once that happened, it really got me thinking about this information in a whole new way. And this on my screen now is just a short video of what that three-dimensional model of Cassiopeia looks like. So this was using the data that we understood was moving away from us versus which was moving towards us to be able to create this three-dimensional model. Now, around the same time, I had some colleagues at the Smithsonian who were in the process of 3D scanning and then 3D printing President Obama's head. And I thought, well, if they can make a 3D print of President Obama's head, I could surely figure out how to make a 3D print of this exploded star. And so that's what this image on the current slide is showing. It's a still photograph of that three-dimensional print of this Cassiopeia A supernova remnant. And once that happened, I really started thinking, all right, well, who could take advantage of these three-dimensional models? So we started working with the National Federation of the Blind and some of their summer students in order to really test out 3D models, such as the one that I showed before, Cassiopeia A, figuring out if these 3D prints were really helpful for explaining some of these scientific concepts, for helping people explore the data using their own tactile techniques. And what we found was that they really did indeed help. These are the lessons learned that we've been able to glean from that research so far. When it comes to 3D printing these objects, the size of them really does matter. If you can make a larger 3D print, it allows more detail for those topographical nuances to be able to be explored. The resolution of your 3D printer is important. When possible, being able to have a higher resolution print allows for smoother and better 3D models. For sure, making sure these prints are very strong, if you have jets that are thin, if you have weak points where something might sort of attach very loosely, any sort of joints or other weak areas, making sure that you reinforce them is also really helpful. And then also something that became very, very quickly apparent to us is that we were approaching these 3D models from a sighted perspective. But when the students who were blind or low vision approached them, they were coming from their own perspectives. And there were very simple things that they wanted to know more of. So for example, with Cassiopeia A, the data from the outside shell tells you one story, but inside the shell tells you another story. So of course, it made sense to actually cut that 3D print in half so that that could be explored both internally and externally. But overall, the result was that the students wanted more 3D models. They wanted more content that could be explored tactilely. And what we found over the past 10 or more years with this project is that it wasn't just benefiting users who are blind or low vision, it was also benefiting other learners as well, children's, adults, it didn't matter. It was just a lot of people found being able to explore a space object with their hands, to be able to feel it, even though it's a tiny, tiny, tiny scaled down version in plastic, was really helpful. So we've done things since then, like work on using magnets to be able to attach models that are cut in half. We've created a kit of these materials that we test piloted through the IAU, through UNESCO activities, through the various NASA centers. I've got a photo of one of those test kits on my screen now. It's just showing about 6 different 3D printed models of different kinds of stars in various stages of evolution. Stellar nurseries, stars that are maturing, stars that have exploded, stars that are hanging out together in pairs, and some of the tactile and braille materials that go with them. So we've been growing our 3D printable library of objects ever since that first exploration of that exploded star, different kinds of exploding stars, different kinds of young star systems, stellar binaries, and the like. And what we found too is that it takes a long time to create a true 3D model. You have to have really good data. You have to have that blue shift and red shift information. You have to have, really solid evidence to be able to create that 3D model using the observational data or substituting with simulational data, mathematical models in the absence of pure observational data. And so in the absence of always having a lot of new models, what we decided to do was adapt Dr. Nicholas Bond's software. He is an astronomer in the UK, an observational astronomer who's blind, and he created this software to be able to create tactile relief maps, plates, essentially 3D printable plates of objects that are just in 2D, that still has a relief texture so that you can explore the sort of topography of that data, if you will, through various different kinds of energy. So that project was going well and good, but then the pandemic hit, and being in the same room with someone was impossible. We lost access to our 3D printers, our students that we were working with. It just became sort of challenging. And so at this time, my colleagues and I started thinking about how we could pivot to something that was more of a rapid response project that was completely digital. And I had been dabbling already in sonification with just this idea of translating information into sound through use of an audio non-speech methodology to be able to help us represent or perceptualize information of whatever kind. And this is a field that's a very large field of research. Many astronomers and other kinds of scientists, many different kinds of researchers are actively sort of pursuing this area. I personally was inspired by Dr. Wanda Diaz and her PhD thesis. So we started doing these sonifications with my colleagues at System Sounds, Dr. Matt Russo, who is an astrophysicist as well as a musician, and his partner Andrew Santaguida, who is a musician and sound engineer. And we started attacking X-ray data through this new method. So how can we take this data that starts out invisible to humans, by the way, right? No one can see X-rays natively with human eyes. So why not think about other ways to perceive this data, for other ways to represent this data than through sound or some other means? And here I'm just going to play one example sonification file, where this is the Chandra Deep Field South. The image itself is perhaps not super exciting to look at. It's a black rectangle with some multicolored dots kind of strewn throughout it. And though the image itself might not look exciting, the science is. This is a deep field showing thousands of black holes, essentially, this beautiful, dense population of black holes deep, deep, deep in our early universe. And to me, that's exciting. But when you look at the image, perhaps it doesn't come across. However, when the sound is mapped using a mathematical translation of the pixel data to sound data, what we have is the following. I'll stop there, but what you're listening to is essentially a sweep of the image from the bottom to the top of the data, and all of those dots, those black holes, or those active galaxies with supermassive black holes at their cores. They are all different energies according to the different object that they are. And so we've cut the sound by those energies, whereas the lower energy X-rays are being represented by the lower sounds and the higher energy X-rays by the higher sounds. So you're hearing the difference in all of those energy levels as you scan up, and you're hearing it through a stereo sound. So I don't know if the stereo sound can be communicated through this platform. However, that's the idea. And so it's just a completely different way to be able to express this scientific information that to me makes a lot of sense. When I first heard this one, it was very moving for me because, again, this is a very exciting image scientifically, but perhaps does not evoke much excitement if you don't know exactly what it is that you're looking at. But when you hear it, it provides a different kind of experience of that data. And when you hear that you're listening to these little beeps and boops of thousands of black holes, perhaps that might be a little bit more exciting. So these sonifications have sort of taken on a life of their own. Back in August, we had a viral moment, I guess you would say. One of our sonifications of the Perseus cluster of galaxies that has a supermassive black hole at its core that is sort of belching out these wonderful bits of energy that are causing sound waves in the hot gas around it. We took that sound wave and sonified it, and that went much more viral than we would have ever expected. I'll just play a short clip of some of the results from the news stories. But according to our meltwater metrics and statistics, about 2 billion people were potentially reached based on the market values of all of the different press and media vendors and venues that carried the coverage. So here is a little clip of that.
Get ready for this, everyone. The actual sound of a black hole. Not the literal sounds from the cosmos, but a translation to help blind and low vision people appreciate the majesty of space.
Chandra astronomers use NASA's flagship X-ray telescope to sonify these sound waves.
What we're listening to is essentially a re-sonification, so a data sonification of an actual sound wave.
That really reaches inside, doesn't it?
So again, we had absolutely no expectation of the sonifications being this well received, but the fact that sighted users as well as blind and low vision users were all taking such pleasure and excitement from this way of understanding data was very, very just completely enthralling for me. I just was so happy to know that people really responded to this data in such a cool way. Again, very unexpected. So since then, we started again with this project back in 2020, and we now have a collection of over 20 different sonifications. They're bespoke creations that we're creating by hand to really help represent the scientific information. And we're using like Python and Logic Pro to be able to do that. But we've also been creating on the side some additional platforms, if you will, for very basic real-time sonification in a very simple manner, just a one-to-one ratio of pixel to data sound, simple, that the user can do on their own, as well as an application that students can try to understand and learn how to do some of the coding on their own to create their own sonification. So this project that started out as a rapid response to the pandemic has completely taken on a life of its own. It's been the most popular feature on the Chandra website since 2020, pretty much. Huge chunks of 2021 and 2022 that have just taken over our web stats. Pretty much anytime we post these on the NASA social media accounts or other digital platforms, they do very well. Significant media coverage, as I mentioned. But we did want to do a research survey of this idea of studying the perception and response to these sonifications across the expert to non-expert spectrum and across sighted users and blind and low vision users. And we had about 4,500 responses, which I am still in the process of analyzing because it was way more data than I ever expected to get. But overall, we had really high learning gains and enjoyment levels for both groups. But we did find that learning about access for the sighted group was significant, meaning that they understood in some new way that other people are accessing information differently than they are. And I think that was pretty exciting to see. So I'll just show you a few quick glimpses of some of the research data, but hopefully I'll be finishing up the article sometime this year. Again, I mentioned that we're in the process of creating additional types of ways of understanding and exploring through the sonification, such as this app with my students. Very excited to be able to do that, but there was one project missing. So back at the end of 2020, I worked with some colleagues, JJ Hunt and Kristine Malick, who are professional visual describers. And Kristine is a member of the blind community. She's been blind since birth. And they have this fantastic podcast where they describe a lot of science data sort of live in real time with these rich descriptions to help other people understand what's happening. And we started to create these rich visual descriptions for every Chandra image that we release to the public. And we've been doing that since January of 2021. Whether it's an image, whether it's a time-lapse movie, a sonification, or an illustration, we provide this rich text in text format and audio format, also as a podcast and on like XML feeds. The technique of this has been pretty important. We have a few things that we did through both trial and error and then also user testing. One, that just describing the image as you might describe a piece of artwork on a museum wall was not as satisfying. There had to be some explanation of the scientific phenomena and what was happening. What the visual viewer was seeing sort of needed to be looped in with what the scientific understanding was, at least in a general way. But that integration was really important. The second was that the style of those descriptions was really important. This type of information can be sort of overwhelming for non-scientists if it's not presented in just the right way. So being careful to write with a style that was approachable, using short sentences, numerous commas, always being careful to use those proper nouns versus using it or, you know, some other sort of more casual word was really critical, because as you're building up a mental map of something, when you're listening to a lengthy description through a screen reader, for example, the commas give you pauses to help absorb the information. Less complex sentence structure lets you focus on the content and not the sort of dripping across of all the information. And that frequent use of proper nouns, meaning referring always to Chandra versus it, was really important to be able to keep all of that information straight. So what we did find is that this information and this technique has actually helped us all over the place. So I'm going to read very quickly just a short snippet of one of these rich visual descriptions. This is on the Cat Sign Nebula, which is sort of like if you could glimpse into the future of our sun in, say, 5 billion years or so, we might have something to look at, something like the Cat Sign Nebula. And so the description goes like this. The Cat Sign video features a static image of an ethereal shape surrounded by concentric circles. The shape is the Cat Sign Nebula, a huge cloud of gas and dust blown off of a dying star. The concentric circles are bubbles expelled by the star over time. The dust cloud resembles the translucent pastry pulled to golden yellow points near our upper right and lower left, with a blob of bright purple jelly inside the bulbous pale blue core. So the idea is to really provide something that has meaning, but that also adds value to a user who's going to typically be non-sighted. But as I mentioned, we found these other improvements. So by taking our captions and thinking about how other users are actually reading them or listening to them as they're being described over a screen reader, it's actually improved our work overall. Our search engine optimization has improved because by using more proper nouns, by constantly referencing things like the object name or the Chandra name, it has actually improved our search engine optimization. They've also helped improve our social media and our HTML. We've been metadata tagging them in addition, and it's just sort of improving our products overall. So I can just say that when we've done some user reviews of this material, the 3D models, the sonification, and the visual descriptions, they've all done very well, but the visual descriptions are the one that most blind and visually impaired users specifically call out as being the most important, because it is an immediate real-time result as they're exploring through all the plethora of information available on the web, to be included in NASA Science as it's being released with a description that's made just for them, that's tested with people who are blind or low vision, has been really important. So the other products are wonderful and I will still keep doing them, but being able to have that sort of real-time response, I think, has been very important to our community members. So I'll just sum up in saying that, when we're designing the universe and we're thinking about how to help others understand all the fascinating bits and pieces of our universe, that availability of data does not equal accessibility. It does not equal equity of the data. We really have to think hard and better on how to do that. And just finally, my last slide is just major props to all of my colleagues, the visual description team, the sonification team, the 3D team. It's been a really fun experience getting to explore our universe in all of these different dimensions and with all of my fabulous colleagues. So I just have to give a shout out to everybody there. And yeah, I'd love to take questions at this point. Hopefully I didn't speak too long. I think I went 2 minutes over.
That's fine, Dr. Arkan, because your presentation is very interesting. Actually, when I hear the signification for those black holes, I think I want that for my alarm. Anyway, so thank you for your presentation, Dr. Arkan. So, does anyone have any questions? I know you have. So, don't be shy. You can either type or you can raise your hands, and then we can let you speak your questions, or you can tell us your questions. You can also open your camera so we can see your beautiful faces. Don't be shy. So this is a community of practice. So we would like to know each and every one of you. So anyone who has a question? Yes, Keshav Kumar. So, well, if I can start with a question. So, Dr. Arkan, do you have is this available online, or can we get the designs for the tactile 3D prints online, for example?
Yes. Perfect question, actually. And on the screen I have presented here, you can see in the bottom left corner, I have some URLs. I'll drop them in chat once I stop screen sharing as well. But the first URL is chandra.si.edu/3D print. And that has a number of the 3D print files. If you're looking for the tactile prints as well, the relief maps, you can go to chandra.si.edu/tactile, and that has pretty much everything I've talked about today. It has a link to the sonifications, it has a link to the visual descriptions, and then it has both the 3D models and the raised tactile plates. If you're interested in any of the other materials, I have additional URLs to chandra.si.edu/sound is where all the sonifications are. I don't think I talked about it too much, but we've also been dabbling in how to attach sound to virtual reality applications to be able to make those accessible. And you can sort of keep touch with that project at chandra.si.edu/VR.
All right, so thank you. I think Rheanne would be interested in that as well.
Great.
So we have a question. So this is not about the tool, but well, can you answer this? How many black holes have been found?
Oh, great. Yeah. So I can say Chandra is like a black hole hunter. So I think one of the really cool things about this telescope is that it has found black holes near and far of sizes small and large and everything in between, even these elusive sort of mid-sized black holes, if you will, that are still very much under discussion. And so just this population of black holes in the deep field south image that I showed and played through sound earlier, I think was the surprise to see just the sheer number of black holes there are. So I'd have to go look up and think how many black holes there might be in the universe, but there's an awful lot, an awful lot. Not as many as there are stars, of course, and all of that, but there are definitely quite a lot of black holes.
All right, thank you. So I hope that answers your question. Anyone? Any more questions?
Can I ask one? Is Cesare?
Go ahead, Cesare.
We are in touch with Kim, who's part of the work group, and we are learning a lot of great stuff. Just one question about sonification, because sonification can transmit two kind of contents. One is emotional, and the other one is informational. And are you targeting any one of these specifically, more or less, based on your surveys, how much the audience appreciates more between the two. I don't know if it's clear.
Yeah, so what's really interesting about the sonifications is that I think I very much undersold what the emotional response to them would be. My own emotional response to them was high because the sonifications are translating visuals that I've been looking at for decades in some cases. So the first time, for example, that we sonified the Cassiopeia supernova remnant and hearing that translation of the data that I have literally worked with since 1999 into sound was very exciting because it was just a new way for me to consider the data. And I think I was surprised at what my overall emotional response has been to hearing that for the first time and hearing some of these other pieces. Now, we're very careful when we're talking about our sonifications, when we're describing them, to make sure it's very clear that these are not recording sounds in the universe. We're not sticking up a microphone, to a cluster of galaxies and recording actual sound. What we're doing is translating pixel data into sound. However, that doesn't mean that as hard as we try, when something is, sent out into the great interwebs, that there isn't somebody who's picking up a story and running with it that is not doing such a great job. And so there definitely have been instances, especially when that story went viral on the Perseus black hole sound, which was in itself complex because it was a sound wave that was detected in that system that we were then sonifying. That sound wave, that pressure wave, actually has a note assigned to it based on its period and all of its information, and that is a B flat. And it's like 57 octaves below middle C, so very low. So when we created that sonification, we took that note and then resonified it and adjusted it up to a level that humans could hear. Got 57 octaves essentially, so hundreds of piano keys, if you will. And so I think with that one, people were really astounded because it was sonifying a sound wave and it felt a lot more real. And so the emotional response to that one, I expect, was quite high. We've had plenty of emotional response to the other sonifications as well. I don't know if you could see on the slides that I showed, but there was actually a word cloud that talked about all of the different emotional response that people had. Awe, beauty, scared, worry, interest, excitement, all of these, sort of evocative terms that people were putting into that open-ended question on how the sonifications made them feel. What we found is that there's actually no statistical significance in that response from people who are experts to the groups of people who are non-experts, nor was there statistical significance between people who are blind or low vision versus people who are sighted. So pretty much across all groups, the emotional response was pretty high. The enjoyment levels were high. The engagement levels were high. So even though we're creating these for and with people who are blind or low vision, people who are sighted were really responding, and all the groups were responding kind of emotionally. Now that does also happen with images. Emotional response can absolutely occur with images as well. But to see the sort of overwhelming evidence that it was occurring at a higher extent with the sonifications was very interesting. And a lot of the media coverage that occurred over the black hole sonification that went viral, headlines sort of latched on to the idea of the eerie, the spooky, the scary, the spectacular, the horror movie soundtrack, or the Hans Zimmer creepy sounds that it was portraying. So anyways, I hope that answers your question. It was a very long answer, but a great question nonetheless.
Interesting. Thanks. I can see sighted people closing their eyes to listen better.
Yes, so we did find that providing the videos enhanced the sighted user's experience, because I think a lot of people aren't necessarily trained how to be listeners, and so the visual helped them focus on what exactly they were listening to.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. So the questions, we will save them to the open forum. So let's move on to our next presentation. Thank you, Dr. Arkan, for a very wonderful presentation on Chandra's Accessible Universe. So to our next presenter, we have Ferdinando De Micco and Luciano Garramone to tell us about the Dante and stars of our time. So Ferdinandino is an amateur astronomer passionate about inclusive scientific dissemination, a member of the Inclusive Divulgation Group of the Italian Amateur Astronomer Union. I hope I said that right. And then we also have Luciano Garramone. He is a technologist and program manager responsible for the operational and engineering activities of space geodesy performed in the Matera Space Geodesy Center. He is also a member of the Inclusive Divulgation Group of the Italian Amateur Astronomer. So without further ado, let's all welcome Luciano and Ferdinandino. So I'll make.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, for your introduction. And I hope that you see my presentation in the screen.
Yes, we can. Can you full screen your presentation? Thank you.
I'm Luciano Garramone. I work for the Italian Space Agency, and in my short presentation, I will give you a few information about the activities that we performed during the last year. The project was developed, the activities were performed in order to promote the personality of the father of the Italian language, Dante Alighieri, on the occasion of the day devoted to him. In Italy, this special day, the 25th of March, is known as Dante Day. One of the purposes of our activity is the protection of the starry sky in this epoch where the light pollution is a problem. And another aspect is the willingness to spread information about the astronomy to all the public, including the blinds, the deaf people, and the handicapped people. The importance of these actions was recognized also from the Italian Ministry of Cultural Heritage that gave its sponsorship to the events organized from the group. The amateur astronomers are involved since a long time in the divulgation of the astronomical connections that are present in the production of Dante Alighieri. For example, we know that in his comedy, the Divina Commedia, contains a lot of astronomical connection. The most known connection is the fact that the three main parts of the comedy, the hell, the purgatory, and the paradise, are closed by reference to the stars. The hell ends with the sentence, we exit to see again the stars, and also the purgatory and the paradise give connections to the sun and other stars. Another very well-known connection to the astronomy is the connection to the Zodiac. We know that the trip of Dante Alighieri in the hell, and then in the purgatory, and then in paradise began at the equinox of the spring, and in the paradise, for example, there is a clear connection to the Zodiac, where he tells that you may see as the oblique circle diverges and brings the planets in order to meet the needs of the Earth. That means that Dante Alighieri had a very deep knowledge of the astronomy. I will give you just another example. In the Paradise, there is a recall to the Ursa Major and to the Ursa Minor. In particular, he tells, suppose the motion of the Ursa Major, the space of our pole is sufficient, and then the constellation never sets, is visible during the whole day. Or suppose the lower part of the Ursa Minor, it has the vertex in the polar star. And there are a lot of other connections, astronomical connections. Okay, you can see just an animation that Dante Alighieri knew very, very well. During the last year, for the 7th century of the death of Dante Alighieri, our group celebrated this special day and organized a special event called Dante and the Stars of Our Time. The location where the event was placed was really a magic site, rich of art and of history. The church of Casaranello in the city of Casarano, in the south part of the Apulia region in Italy. The church was erected between the 5th and the 7th and the 6th century after Christ, and contains numerous artistic representation of astronomic objects. This aspect recalls the artistic representation that are present in the Basilica of Santa Croce in the city of Ravenna. That was the city where Dante Alighieri lived the last years of his existence. The event was organized and conducted by Ferdinando, that is the responsible of the inclusive divulgation activities for the South Italy of the Unione Astrofili Italiani, by myself and by Federica Cataldi. And why Federica Cataldi? Because Federica Cataldi is a musician, in particular is an harp player that executed musical masterpieces, musical songs with astronomical reminders. The main activities of inclusiveness carried out during the event were the listening of the sound coming from the planets and from the sun. That means from our solar systems, the emission, radio frequency emission in the audio band. Then the execution of musical pieces with astronomical reminders, and also we proposed the presentation of a touchable reproduction of the vault of the church with the particularity of embossed stars which decorate the vault. The event was sponsored also by the local section of the Amateur Archaeological Society, and the event went very well, and a lot of people attended to the event and showed a clear appreciation for the representation. This was not the unique activity that we performed during the current year. In the last month of August, another event similar to this was taken in the main church of Terranova del Pollino, that is a little village of the Basilicata region. Also the Basilicata region is a part of the south of Italy. This is our short presentation of the activities that we performed during this year, and we hope to do other representations also in the near future. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you again for that interesting presentation. So, do you have any questions from the audience?
Just a question about, I know you have been working with the National Blind Association, right, on some of these events. So if you have any feedback from them, that would be interesting.
Yeah, we work together with the Blind Association, the Italian association, and also with the regional association, and we have a very good connection with this group. All the activities in particular began in 4 years ago, if I remember well, when a group of blinds were received in the work where I work, in a space geodesy center, where we have a radio telescope, and it was possible to hear the sounds coming from the stars, from the pulsars, and we proposed again the recording of the sound coming from the planets.
All right, thank you. And anyone has any questions? I have a question as well. So, do you have a recording for the sonification of the stars, or the tools that you have?
During the visit that the group of blinds make to the Space Geodesy Center, I was able to propose the hearing of the noise coming from the sun, and from a strong radio source that was presented by the Dr. Arkan, by Cassiopeia A, because it is a very strong radio source, and it is possible to amplificate the radio frequency and to propose also the hearing of this strong source. We now have the project that is ongoing to have an home radio telescope to hear noise coming from the sun and from the moon, but this is the near future.
Okay, thank you. So hopefully we can have we can hear also your recordings for that. Hopefully someday, if you have a link, you can share and we can collate. Our group can.
Now I may propose to you the recording that was done not by us, but it is possible to take this recording from internet, and that are very particular, and that we propose to the blinds at the beginning of our representation. If you want, I may propose 2 minutes of sounds coming from the sun and from the planets.
Okay, that would be helpful.
Do you hear now?
Yeah, we can hear now. Yeah.
This is the sun. During our representation, often when we speak about Uranus, we propose also some music of Herschel, that was the astronomer that observed for the first time Uranus. Because Herschel was a very clever musician. In the first part of his life, Herschel was a musician, and only in the second part of his life it was an astronomer. And then also this is part of our of our inclusive activities for the blinds. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Luciano, for sharing your activity to us. So, if anyone does anyone have a question? Going once. But you may chat your questions for later during our open forum. All right. So let's move on now to our next presenter. So, of course, our next presenter, the last but not the least, our lead on Inclusive Outreach Subgroup Coordinator, so Mr. Cesare Pagano, to share with us a glimpse of the IAU Inclusive Outreach Starter Kit. So if you haven't heard of that, so Cesare will share. So I'll give the floor now to Cesare. Wait. So I'll make Cesare a presenter. All right, so the floor is yours now, Cesare.
Okay, so thank you very much. And thank you, Cristina, for the introduction. And thank you all for this chance. So I'm also an amateur astronomer based in Italy, serving as the General Secretary of the National Association of Amateur Astronomers. And I'm also the coordinator of this beautiful group, which is the IAU Inclusive Outreach Subworking Group. Now, I'm here today to briefly introduce the IAU Inclusive Outreach work. So what do we do and how we can help with the adoption of inclusive practices in astronomy outreach. Briefly introduce the group at the previous webinar, if you were there in April. But this time we'll go into some more details about the group available resources. So let's start with a brief recap. So let me remind what our group is about, starting from what we mean by inclusive outreach, because the term inclusive can be quite broad. So for our work group, inclusive outreach is about giving people with disabilities equal opportunities to benefit from the astronomy outreach efforts that many professionals and amateurs deliver. Access to scientific culture is an important element of societies. Therefore, this equal access is very important. And there are many individuals and groups around the globe who develop the skills, experiences, tools, methodologies about inclusion. Some very creative ones in some cases, for instance, to explain the eclipses, Earth movements, constellations, and so on. And this picture shows some examples. The idea is that if we can put these experience as common share knowledge available for everyone, this could be an incredible asset for the global community. And this is where our work group comes into play. So our very goal is to make this knowledge widely known and shared, and to facilitate the adoption of inclusive practices. Now, let's take a look at how we designed to pursue this goal. So we identified 4 main areas, basically, that are shown on this slide. And the numbers in the blue circle show the priority. So let's go through them. There are 2 key elements to effectively promote the adoption of inclusive practices: sharing and community. So sharing the knowledge and the experience, that is a way to grow faster together, and community as a way to make this common knowledge actually used and relevant in the field. So you consider these 2 aspects as our first priority. Other than that, we are reaching out to the major association of people with disabilities worldwide to get guidance from their knowledge and to connect our efforts with their communities. So institutions like the European Blind Union. Finally, also we want to encourage further experiments and to expand the inclusive outreach practices, as this field is relatively new, so there is still a lot of room to innovate. So this was a brief recap of our work group and what we do. Now let's look at some useful resources that you can use today. In our last webinar, we mentioned our first deliverable, which is the Inclusive Outreach Starter Kit. It is meant to assist those who are starting adopting inclusive practices and make them feel confident in their first steps. It includes a good practice document and a set of 3 basic activities. Today, I would like to go a little bit deeper in some more details about what is included in the kit, so you can have a better feeling of what is there and how it can help you. So let's start from the good practices. This is the table of contents. As you can see, it's a pretty comprehensive recreational tool. You can find suggestions for all the steps of the activity planning and execution. So after the introduction, section 2 shares general good practices about an event: how to plan and promote it, how to arrange the logistics, how to run it. Section 3 focuses on operational aspects specific to disability type. So for each type, you can find good practices on how to design and plan the activity and how to run it. In the next slides, we look at some of the excerpts from the section about visual disabilities, just to give a feeling. We are not going to read through the whole document today. So you can have a better understanding and then for yourself. So good practices for visual impairment. Let's start from the planning section. How do we plan an activity? So clearly define the topic and communication strategy. This is true in general, but it's especially important when dealing with people with the visual impairment. Complement explanation and image description with as many tactile elements as possible. So identify the logical steps that require the use of the tactile support along with the wording. So whenever possible, use a physical model and design also the way it should be used and how to explain it. When it's not possible to make a tactile tool because it's too complex or whatever, think about a careful verbal explanation. It is essential to explain what cannot be touched. So whenever possible, aim at the creation of a 3D or better 4D tools. So 4D means moving to show the evolution of the phenomenon over time. If possible, avoid flat models because these 3D models are more effective. Then build a well-structured and clear educational path. How you want to lead the audience through the whole thread of thoughts. Organize your speech by avoiding jumping from one detail, a subject or image to another one without joining them via a solid logical thread. Very important, rehearse your demonstration several times together with your collaborators and select the simplest and most effective and fluid logical path to follow. This is very important. Avoid overlapping multiple voices and explanations during the lesson. So there is only one speaker who is in charge and speaks and leads the work. During tactile exploration, other staff members should only guide the hands of the participants while following the speaker's speech. It's like the speakers having many hands. And then fix the maximum number of participants depending on the environment and the number of staff members available. So for an educational context, small classes, maximum 8 or 10 participants are preferred. And provide multiple copies of the tactile tools to reduce the waiting time so people can use them in parallel. Then next sub-chapter is how to design and manufacture the tactile tools. Of course, start by searching online for solutions that may already be invented and, most importantly, implemented and tested by others, so they are reliable. Avoid starting from scratch, reinventing things that already exist, and rather look for ways to improve existing solutions. Simplify the idea to focus only on the primary objective of the tool. So avoid too many details that are accessory, if you will, and could distract or make the logical thought less fluid. When designing a tool, investigate all the mechanical, electronic, economic issues that may arise and make the realization of that tool possible. So there are, of course, budget and feasibility implications. During the design phase, involve experts for the specific aspects as needed, as well as blind people as co-designers. So doing this work together with blind persons is very important because they can guide you in making the right things. Then different materials provide different tactile stimuli and emotional sensations. So we have to carefully choose the material to be used for the surface of things, because the textures of what they touch for blind people is like colors are for us. They convey information, they can be pleasant or unpleasant and so on. So use different materials and textures to differentiate the different areas of the tool and avoid hard or sharp-edged elements, of course. Then test the prototypes with visually impaired people and expert in typology. Typology is the science of blindness and the care of blind people. So those are the experts of how to teach to blind people, basically. Include a braille description on the object to allow both blind and visually impaired people to read them. For those not used or not familiar with the reading braille, like the newest generations, consider the new smartphone-based technologies to assist in. So things like QR code, text, NFC, and so on, things that the phone will read aloud. And document the creation and use of new instruments by writing down technical notes and attaching explanatory photos and videos for to be able to reproduce it and improve over time. Now, conducting the event, this is the third phase. So tactile exploration is very different from the at-a-glance perception of the sighted person. So when you present a tactile tool and use it to have blind people explore it, it's a good practice to provide first a quick overview of the whole. The image can then be assembled by combining the mental image that blind people will make, can then be assembled by combining the details acquired through haptic perception. For people who have been blind for birth, the details come first. They are used to explore from the details and then build the mental image, especially if they are not well trained in the use of touch. People with acquired blindness, visually impaired people, are more often accustomed to take a global glance first. So this mental approach is very important to keep in mind when interacting with blind people. Repeat the concepts and details several times. First of all, to reinforce the message and make sure that it has been properly understood, but also to reinforce the memory, the mental image that people are forming, because I mean that's the only thing they have. They have to keep alive this mental image. Use topological information. This is very important. Just don't say here, there, and so on, but say like to the right, 2 meters ahead, at 3 o'clock, and so on. Give precise references. Whenever possible, exploit multisensory approach. So touch, hearing, and physical engagement, having some physical activities around the models that explain the concept. Concepts taken for granted by sighted are not so for blind from birth. Things like horizon, shadow, perspective, and so on. So I still remember one of the most impressive feedback that we got from a person who's blind from birth after taking one of the classes, that she finally understood what sunset and sunrise means. So, I mean, it's easy for us to give that for granted. It's not always the case. Always act with the greatest delicacy possible when guiding the participants' hands during tactile tools. And warn before, so say, I'm going to make you touch this tool, and then you take the hand and drag it along. Avoid treating a person with disability like a child by touching or caressing him repeatedly. And also avoid addressing the blind person as assistant instead of talking directly to the blind person. They're just blind, but they're capable for any other means. Now, closing this part about the good practices. And again, I wanted to go into some details just to give a feeling of what's there, but I'm not going to give a class today. So about the logistic organization of the events, seek a collaboration from a BDI association whenever possible to ensure that the necessary assistance for participants is there, especially for travel and transportation. Look for an environment that is as quiet as possible, because noise, background noise is just terrible, because the sound is the only communication means. And also clear all objects, the space as much as possible. So I have the table in the middle and everything else around the walls, so people can move around freely without danger. Consider that you may have guide dogs there. And before the event, gather information about special needs for each participant, because sometimes people can have multiple disabilities. And if it's the first time you arrange such an event, consult with early with experts from the local and national associations. So this was just a not so quick overview of what's in there, so you know what to expect from this document. Now, to close the overview of the starter kit, the other component we say is the basic activities. There are 3. The first one is a set of tactile constellations made with printouts of constellations pins, and wool thread. So very simple, very cheap, very easy. The second one is a set of stars of different sizes in scale, made by polystyrene balls and colored with tempera colors. And the third one is a 5 meters rope, about 16 feet, that reproduces the solar system distances in scale. If you remember, we said that it's important also to have a physical experience, but just walking the rope is an important experience for blind people because they can appreciate the physical scale of distances. So as you can see, these are simple models that can be built with a very low budget in order tens of euros or dollars, whatever. In most countries, of course, this may not be true worldwide. Simple manual skills, but still, even though they are simple, there's quite a bit of science that can be explained with them. And the description also includes step-by-step instructions for building the tool, as well as suggestions on how to conduct the activity and which science to explain along. And these tools have been used on the field for 10 years or so, so they are well tested. Now, other than the starter kit, on the same website, there is a resources section where you can find many more different complexity and cost level, and you can just browse through. They are grouped by disability type. Most of the resources are designed for people with visual impairments, but they're actually also effective educational tools in general, because in fact, understanding these complex spatial concepts is sometimes challenging also for sighted people. So having a physical model to look and touch is always very helpful. Okay, enough for the starter kit. Now we know what's in there. Just quickly to recap what we are doing for the other areas. So building the community, we post periodically information on the IAU Astronomy for Equity and Inclusion Facebook page. We have this inclusive outreach community group with more than 300 members. We are in touch regularly with the IAU National Outreach Coordinators group to reach out to national communities in a two-way communication. And we are running this quarterly or so community practice webinar. So as I said, we are trying to build the community as an important piece of our approach because this is the way to share the knowledge. Now, finally, engaging the category associations, we engaged the European Blind Union with support of the President's Office. The first step was the publication of an article about our activities on the EBU newsletter in February. More recently, we published a post about the famous James Webb Space Telescope file images that were published in July. And there are now ongoing collaborations in Italy and Romania. And we are also working there to arrange some specific education for outreach practitioners. And we have plans to engage corresponding entities in other countries as well as the World Blind Association. It's just what we are doing in this area for now. Now, in closing, how can you all play with all these? How can you all be involved and contribute or leverage these resources? First of all, use us. So use our resources and provide feedback. If you have never done anything inclusive, you can start a lot with inclusive practice with our help. And please provide feedback. Ask the community if you need help, if you have questions, and so on. Feedback is important for us. You can share either on Facebook group or via email. Second thing, share. So if you have experience, if you have done anything from simple to complex, it's always helpful for the others to know. So just share on the group, tell your story, share pictures, give advice, and so on. If you have a specific tool, well documented in the style that you see from our tools, you can also submit for publication on the IAU website. Then the other thing you can do is network. So help us grow the community, join the group and promote to your network from whoever you know and so on. And there is also specific for BDI mentorship program in collaboration with Astronomy for Equity Association. And finally, contribute. So if you have experience and time and you want to contribute to our working group effort, you can apply to join the group, and we'll be glad to hear from you. Finally, on this last slide, you can find a link to record the session from the Communicating Astronomy to the Public Conference 2021. So the first link shows all the sessions. It's a lot of interesting information, useful resources. I also highlighted a selection of the sessions that are most relevant to inclusion, but there are also others. So feel free to browse, explore, and hear. It's about 10 minutes each, so it doesn't take long. We just ran the 2022 conference last week, so the resources are not published yet, but we will publish on the Facebook group when they're available. So this was the last slide. This ends this brief introduction to what we do and what you can do to join this initiative and help make astronomy and science in general more accessible and relevant to society. So we hope to see you and other outreach practitioners from your countries as part of the inclusive outreach community. Thanks a lot. Back to you, Kristine.
Thank you very much, Cesare, for introducing our working group to our participants today. So actually, we have a comment here. So it's coming from Ree Sakuma. So he or she said that I'm low vision and I'm science teacher of special needs education school, and I'm interested in these practices so much. So you're all welcome here. So if you have any questions, so do you have any question for Cesare, by the way? Does anyone have a question?
Yeah, and as we read, I just wanted to mention that there are a lot of references in the presentation. We can either share the slides on the group or in some other way so that you can have access. You don't have to type by looking at the recording of the session.
Okay.
And
right.
Just for comment, I'm glad that this is very, very helpful. Our experience is mainly focused on outreach rather than to formal education. But anyhow, something is in common. So just wanted to share this information so that don't expect to cover all aspects of education, but some practices are relevant definitely to education.
All right. So I think our participants are kind of shy, but we have Cesare. So how do they join us if they want to join our subgroup?
In the slide, there is a link to the form to apply. I can also paste here. Let me just go to the slide, copy and paste. But as I said, I will make the presentation available so you have all the all the links easily accessible.
Okay.
Okay, I just posted it. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Also, Dr. Arkan also posted the link to the tactile. So if you are interested in printing the tactile that she showed a while ago, so feel free to go there and get the designs and print out your own tactile version of the stars. And then Cesare also posted the link to our so that you can join our group. Does
right,
anyone have a question?
There is another link I can share on the fly. Give me 1 second, which is the link to our web page. So again, it's in the presentation, but it's the other important one. It is the starting point for many things. Let me see if I got it right. Yes. Okay, there it is. Okay.
All right. So if we can now have our open forum now. So please feel free to open your camera and ask your questions or share your stories if you want, or if you have any tools that you want to share with the group. Don't be shy. So go ahead. Feel free to share. Oh, we also have here Amelia. Hi, Amelia. So Amelia
Hi,
is
hello.
our lead.
No,
No.
not anymore. Now Susanna is your lead, your leader.
Okay.
Susanna and Jake. But it's a pleasure to be with you today.
I must say that our group is well represented today, right?
Yeah. Oh, we also have OAO here. Oh, so Dr. Arkan answered the question from a while ago about the black holes. So I'll just read the answer here. So to answer the earlier question, the most recent study I've seen on total number of black holes in the universe is 40 quintillion. Wow, I can't even imagine that number. I don't think anyone can imagine that number. If you have questions about black holes and very interesting stuff, we have Dr. Arkan here, so might as well ask your questions about anything or about the universe or something. Let me check if we have questions over Facebook. Okay, so you can type your questions. Don't be shy. We have our experts here. And we also have Kelly from IAU OAO. So hello, Kelly.
Or maybe we can ask questions to the audience.
Yeah.
So if I can.
Go ahead, Cesar.
So is there anyone who has already done some activity with an inclusive approach? So like having activities that are inclusive for people with visual impairment or hearing impairment, or has anyone participated to such an event? You can either open your mic. Yeah. Sorry, go on, Kristine.
Sorry, or if anyone who wants to join the group, you can raise your hands, and then we can introduce you to the group. Oh, okay.
Oh, nice, Sarah.
Oh, that's very cool. So, Astronomy Club at School for the Deaf. Oh, do you want to present in our next webinar? I will get your contact number for that. So that's very cool. So, do you have? Can you share a little bit about that if you want?
Hello. Yeah, I'll be very honest. We didn't we didn't intend to go to this School for the Deaf. It was a general project starting astronomy clubs in schools, and I work in Ghana, and you have to go through the district education authority, and it was all a bit of a palaver. In the end, what happened was the person in charge just gave us a list of schools and said, yeah, all right, these are the schools you can go to start your astronomy clubs. And by pure chance, one of them was this School for the Deaf. So I said, I have to, confess, we didn't go deliberately looking for them. And so we did go, the first time we went to the school to visit the teachers and just ask and say, well, how do we do this? There was just two or three of us volunteers. We didn't have any experience of working with deaf or hard of hearing people. And the teacher just gave us some very basic guidelines, just really saying how the students, you needed a lot of explanation, how they really enjoyed practical activities and things, that visually they could see how something happens, or videos, animation, things like that. So we did find it took a bit longer to explain the concepts compared to some of the other schools, some of the other classes. But they did really enjoy it. They were very enthusiastic, and I think for us as well, it was just very interesting. I mean, it was a whole new experience for us, so we really enjoyed it. I mean, I have to say, it was like a short-term project, so we're not still going there. Although last year we did win one of those telescopes for all, for that school. But we're just trying to do a little bit of fundraising so we can, I said, because we're all volunteers, to sort of be able to go back there and because we want to train the teachers so that they'll know how to use the telescope properly. So there is some contact, but I'm not sure if the astronomy club is still going with the teachers there.
That's very cool. So do you know about the, what they call this, the handbook or the manual for astronomy sign languages?
Yes.
So
I'm very interested in that because, of course, the sign language is different in every country. I mean, I didn't even realize, I just showed my ignorance. I didn't even realize, you know, that when we went there, you know, they said the Ghana Sign Language is different to American Sign Language or British Sign Language. And also, I think, you know, it's an evolving language. The kids come up with their own signs. You know, I heard the teachers saying they would be talking about something, say, oh, and then they'd ask the kids, oh, what's the sign for such and such? You know, and the kids would say, oh, it's like this. Oh, okay. So it was really very interesting. But yeah, I was, because that is one of the things they said, actually. They said there are very few signs for any of those astronomical concepts, even some of the basic, you know, planets and things. So the sign is something like, you know, an object that goes around another object or something like that. They did say that. But so I remember thinking, oh, you know, would we have to have some kind of meeting and sort of maybe talk about how, you know, how do we introduce some new signs or some of these like astronomical signs to the community? I'm not quite sure how you would sort of go about that.
Wow, that's very cool. So Kelly from IAU sent over the second edition of the astronomy sign language. So if you're interested, just get it online. So that's very cool. Congratulations.
Okay.
Creating the group. I think we have a question from Pankaj. So can anyone answer this? How can I measure the mass of the black hole? Oh, I also see Sylvia here. Hi, Sylvia. Familiar names, and Girly, Tony, and Kenneth. Hello.
Hello to everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Sylvia. So to answer the question, the way to measure the mass of a black hole in an easy way, let's say, it's just to study the orbits of the objects which are around it, and then using Kepler laws, you can find an estimate of the mass.
Yeah. So that's also what Dr. Arkan said. So one way is to find out the speed of orbiting materials around it. Yeah.
And then I guess that if you want to be more precise, then you will have to start caring about Einstein's general theory of relativity, but that's one step farther.
All right. So I think we can close now the webinar. It's almost it's 14:30 almost, I guess. So does anyone who wants to share more or have any questions? Oh, so Dr. Argan have a sample problem set for you, so you can answer it during your free time. So you have that problem set if you want to compute. All right. So Cesare, any more? Do you have any more to say or closing remarks for this session?
Just thanks all those who attended, and you know, this is a community, so it's not someone on stage giving a lesson. It's more sharing experiences. So feel free to speak, ask questions, and you know, we will learn more. We will try to keep the quarterly schedule, and hopefully this will be more and more interactive. And I just wanted to thank a lot Kristine and Rheanne for all the effort to make this happen. So thanks.
All right. So again, thank you for attending the second webinar, and hopefully we can you can also join our third webinar. We haven't set the date yet, but we will message you again over our social media accounts and over your emails. So again, thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Arkan, Ferdinandino, and Luciano, and of course, Cesare, for presenting for today's webinar. Thank you very much. All right. Bye, everyone, and have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.